evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. At the core of any political campaign is the message, what it's about. What exactly are next Tuesday's midterm elections about? Well, on the one side, it's pretty clear. Donald Trump, who's the leader of the Republican Party and in effect its only spokesman, says that a vote for Republican candidates is a vote for secure borders and against crime and chaos. You don't have to believe the president when he says this, but that's definitely what Republicans are running on. What are Democrats running on? That's less clear. Against Trump, certainly. Democrats talk about the president even more than he talks about himself, which is a lot. They don't like him at all. Fine. But despising someone isn't really a platform or a path forward. At best, it's a reaction. What are the ideas that unite the Democratic Party right now? Well, for the answer to that, we go to the other cable stations, which over the past couple of years have come to function much as the DNC used to function, as the Democratic Party's brain trust and mouthpiece. If you want to know what Democrats are thinking, watch CNN and MSNBC. Last night was especially instructive. Here are two contributors to MSNBC. One writes for the New York Times. The other is a professor at Princeton, which is an Ivy League college in New Jersey. Both have impressive credentials. Both are considered deep thinkers by most of the other people in this country who think of themselves as intellectuals. Watch as they explain what they've learned since the 2016 election.
What I did wrong in 2016 is I overestimated white people. I didn't think white people would put him in office.
I'm not willing to let white voters off the hook. I think that they, like the rest of us, should be treated as adults. And I think that there are a large number, I would say a majority of white Americans in this country who are not just Democrats, but who are people of conscience, who are good Americans. And I believe that they need to move from saying, well, I don't like his tweets, but, you know, the economy's doing okay. They need to move from there to reality, which is that we have a white nationalist president who's a threat to American democracy.
Now, there was a time not so long ago, just a few years ago, really, when language like this was considered textbook race hatred, even by liberal Democrats. You weren't allowed to blame entire races of people for anything. You weren't even supposed to think of your fellow Americans primarily in terms of their race, and skin color is one thing that nobody can control. To paraphrase a longtime liberal hero whose ideas are now ignored, what matters is the content of a person's character. But not anymore. Now, the opposite is true. Identity is everything. Here's CNN's Don Lemon on Monday night.
So we have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban on, they have the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that?
We have to start doing something about them, these people of a certain skin color. That's what Don Lemon said. Now, before you get too outraged about that and stop watching his show every night, keep in mind that Don Lemon is a cable news host. He's on television 5 hours a week live. He's bound to say something indefensible once in a while. They all do. We can actually vouch for that, having done it ourselves, unfortunately. But here are the rules. When you say something awful that you can't defend, don't try to defend it. Apologize. Explain what you meant and move on. Vow to do better. That's a rule for life, not just television news. We all learned it as kids. On the left, though, it no longer applies. Here's what Don Lemon said last night about his remarks on Monday.
I said that the biggest terror threat in this country comes from radicals on the far right, primarily white men. That angered some people. Their analysis shows that for every 8 deadly attacks by right-wing extremists, there were 1 by left-wing extremists. Those are the facts. So people who were angered about what I said are missing the entire point. We don't need to worry about people who are thousands of miles away. The biggest threats are homegrown.
If you didn't like what I said, that's your problem. You'll notice the lack of contrition. When Don Lemon said we have to start doing something about Americans of a certain skin color, turns out it wasn't a mistake. He meant that. He didn't apologize because nobody in his world asked him to. They're all saying pretty much the same thing. This is now a common view in the Democratic Party. It's one of the things they're running on. Now, lots of Americans won't like that message, obviously, but Democrats are not concerned about that. They no longer care what those Americans think. They've given up on trying to represent them, and that's why they fight harder to defend birthright citizenship for foreigners than they ever fought to protect American citizens from heroin or plunging middle-class wages or privacy-destroying tech monopolies. They know who their constituency is. That also explains their sudden sympathy for lawbreakers over everyone else. You already know about the Democrats' demand that America ignore its own immigration laws, but it's gone far beyond that. Elizabeth Warren, who's a senator from Massachusetts and is running for president in 2020, has condemned our entire criminal justice system as irredeemably racist. Meanwhile, the Hollywood Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke agrees with that. He's called our justice system, quote, the new Jim Crow. He accused cops of shooting people based on their skin color. Now, he offered no evidence that cops do shoot people just based on their skin color. He didn't need to because he just knows it's true. Meanwhile, Democratic cities around the country have decided that laws against crimes like shoplifting and public urination and others can no longer be enforced because that would be racist. Now, the result of all of this is inevitable. It's always the same everywhere. More crime. And you're already seeing that in many places. Turns out the victims are not cloistered rich people like Beto O'Rourke. They're normal people of all races. Crime hurts everyone, but it tends to hurt the poor the most. If that's occurred to Democrats, they haven't mentioned it. They're feeling good about themselves right now. They know they're likely to win back the House on Tuesday, and they're feeling vindicated, more self-righteous than ever. We searched long and hard today for a piece of tape that could sum up the Democratic worldview right now. And we found this. It was shot by a network cameraman covering the president's trip to the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh this week. The protester screaming at the president happens to be a Presbyterian minister. Watch.
It's not about you! Let the families grieve. This is our neighborhood. You are not welcome here. You don't belong here. This is our neighborhood. We welcome everybody here.
You're not welcome here. We welcome everybody. Well, that's pretty much the whole Democratic message right there. Will it work? Maybe on Tuesday, maybe for a little while. Angela Merkel tried it in Germany. So did the people who until recently ran Brazil. But ultimately, their countries rejected that message. Voters want you to care about them. It's their country. And they'll know it if you don't care about them. And in the end, they will punish you for that. They always do. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight. You are not welcome here. We welcome everybody. It's almost like a haiku, and yet it does kind of explain the worldview.
Yes, and they're not aware of the contradiction. You said that these guys despise Trump, and that's true. But what they don't seem to realize is that despising Trump elides very quickly into despising tens of millions of your fellow Americans.
Exactly.
And I think people understand that that actually isn't the kind of country they want to move into. What a lot of these people seem to enjoy is the frisson of civil war on the cheap, as it were. In other words, you can divide yourself into warring tribes without actually having war, without actually torching and burning each other's villages. And they get a kick out of it. It's a sign of decadence, because normal politics, which are boring policy differences and not terribly exciting, are insufficient to them these days. So they want to have this kind of frisson that they're somehow living some epic primal life by yelling at the president from the streets in what is supposed to be some kind of dignified remembrance of 11 dead people. She should be ashamed of herself, that woman.
But she's not, and I think the Senior warden at her church basically blamed everybody else but her. But I wonder if this kind of politics works. I mean, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with not liking a politician, even despising a politician. I've certainly felt that way. But when you say out loud that you hate his voters and you hate, almost half the country, and you prefer people from other countries, in the end, I don't think that works as a political message, does it?
No, I think that's how Trump became president, because there are tens of millions of just ordinary people who would switch on the TV during 2015 and they would see people not talking about anything that matters to them. Democrats were talking about fashionable niche constituencies that ordinary, boring white people in towns where the mills and factories had closed had barely heard of. And they couldn't understand why barely detectable demographics, like fine with gays, fine with transgenders, then we get to intersexuals. Most people have never even met an intersexual, questioning. They don't know what it is. They don't understand why these people matter, and tens of millions of ordinary Americans don't matter. They don't understand why foreigners who simply want to walk into your country have more rights than people who were born here and have been citizens of the United States all their life. That's how Trump came along. And Don Lemon and people don't realize that that they're partly responsible for Trump. Yeah. And so when he starts talking about white men being terrorists, the distinguishing feature of a terrorist is not that he's a white man. That's actually demonizing, as you say, half the country. But Don Lemon, they don't seem to have learned the lessons of the last 2 years. If you want more Trump, this is how you get more Trump.
Voters want leaders to behave as parents do with a family. You love your children. You don't love your stepchildren more. And if your kids know that you hate them, they're going to punish you in the end, I think. Anyway, thank you very much, Mark Steyn. Very wise.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. Thank you.
Great to see you. Well, projection is, of course, the defining fact of the modern left. On virtually every issue, they attack their opponents as what they are. They call them racist, even as they denounce half the country for its skin color. Kansas gubernatorial candidate Chris Kobach is the latest person to learn that lesson the hard way. Over at CNN, Jeffrey Toobin says that because he dislikes Kobach's views, Kobach is, of course, a bigot. Here's part of it.
Chris has devoted his career to stopping black people and poor people from voting. I mean, that's been your goal for decades.
That is an outrageous accusation.
Well, it's completely true.
That is an absolutely outrageous accusation.
I mean,
so if you like photo ID, you're trying to stop people of color from voting?
Absolutely.
That is outrageous.
Absolutely.
Chris Kobach joins us tonight. Chris, thanks a lot for coming on. So, is there an argument that, and we've done this topic a couple of times, but I don't fully understand it. So the idea is what you just said. If you're trying to make certain that people vote legally and ask for ID, that's an act of bigotry. What is flesh out that argument, if you would. I don't understand it.
The argument itself is a racist one. The argument is that somehow because of your skin color, you are less likely to have in your wallet a photo ID, or you're less likely to be able to go to a government office and get a free photo ID. It's a ridiculous argument. It's been disproven empirically in state after state. But the hard left, and now increasingly the entire left, keeps making the argument. And, you know, Tucker, I went into that debate, that program, thinking we were going to have a cordial debate about birthright citizenship. But as soon as Jeffrey Toobin started losing the argument, he just out of the blue says, well, you've devoted your career to stopping people of color from voting. It's crazy.
You're a bad person.
And it just showed how weak.
But I wonder why, I mean, since ID is required for everything. I mean, you can't cash your paycheck. You can't get on an airplane. You can't stay in a hotel or rent a car. I mean, you can't get into buildings without an ID. So why does no one ever call those laws racist, I wonder?
Well, because maybe they aren't racist, and maybe it's not racist for your bank to insist on an ID when you cash a check. But of course, they pull this out of nowhere, and they don't realize the inconsistency that you just pointed out, and that my 12-year-old daughter could have pointed out to them. They just, you know, it must be racist. Never mind that it's an incoherent statement.
I wonder, I mean, this is probably not the first time you've been attacked this way, and the presumption is that the person attacking you knows what you think, is somehow has X-ray vision and can see your heart, and knows what your feelings are, which is insane. But beyond that, it has kind of short-circuited a rational conversation about the integrity of our elections, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. I mean, even to suggest that voter fraud exists, which it does, and we've prosecuted many cases in my office as Secretary of State in Kansas, to even suggest that it exists is racist, just like they've short-circuited the immigration debate. If you want to enforce our laws, you must be a racist. If you want to stop the caravan, you must be a racist. I mean, it just cuts off the debate completely when you attack the person making the other argument.
I tried to buy Sudafed for my kids a couple of years ago at CVS, and they wouldn't sell it to me because I didn't have an ID. I'm waiting for people to picket CVS for its racist Sudafed policy. Do you think that'll happen?
Don't hold your breath.
It's unbelievable. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, Democrats in North Dakota are trying to save incumbent Senator Heidi Heitkamp by telling hunters not to vote. Good luck with that. We've got details in that and the other big political stories as the midterms approach us after the break.